You were never too sensitive, you were never too emotional, you were never the problem. But somewhere along the way, someone convinced you that making yourself smaller was the same thing as being good. And you believed them, and you kept believing them for years, maybe decades, quietly shrinking in rooms where you deserved to take up space, swallowing words that deserved to be spoken, absorbing treatment that deserved to be refused. Not because you were weak, but because you were taught that your discomfort was less important than everyone else's comfort. And that lesson, that quiet, invisible lesson, may be the most damaging thing that ever happened to you. What I am about to share with you is not a motivational speech. It is not a list of habits. It is not another video telling you to believe in yourself and manifest your potential. What this is a philosophy, an ancient one, built by people who understood something about human nature that most of us spend our entire lives trying to learn through pain instead of wisdom. The Stoics did not just teach people how to think, they taught people how to become the kind of person that life cannot easily break. And that is a very different thing from simply being nice. There is a distinction hiding inside Stoic philosophy that almost nobody talks about. It is quiet, it is uncomfortable, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The distinction is this: there is a profound difference between a person who never hurts anyone because they are incapable of it, and a person who never hurts anyone because they have chosen not to. One of those people is harmless, the other is something else entirely. The other is dangerous in the truest sense of the word, capable, grounded, impossible to easily manipulate. And their kindness, the kindness they offer freely and genuinely, means something completely different from the kindness of someone who has no other choice. The Stoics called this the difference between virtue born from fear and virtue born from strength. And they believed without compromise that only one of those was real virtue at all. Picture this. It is the 2nd century. Rome is the greatest empire the world has ever seen, and at its center sits a man who never wanted to be there. Marcus Aurelius did not seek power. He was chosen for it, trained for it, handed it like a weight he was expected to carry without complaint. And by every historical account, he carried it with a kind of quiet dignity that still feels almost impossible to believe. He commanded the largest military force on earth. He made decisions that shaped the lives of millions. People feared him. People respected him. People competed desperately for his approval. And every night, in complete privacy, he wrote in a small journal that he never intended anyone to read. Not history, not the public. Himself, just himself. Reminders to stay patient, reminders to remain humble, reminders not to be pulled off center by flattery or by anger or by the endless noise of people who wanted something from him. That journal survived. We call it Meditations today, and what strikes me every time I read it is not the wisdom exactly, it is the honesty. Here was the most powerful man alive, writing private notes to himself about how easy it was to lose yourself, about how quietly seductive it was to let anger decide things, about how much discipline it actually takes to remain kind when you have every reason and every ability not to be. That is what I want you to hold on to. The man wrote those things not because he was failing, but because he understood something essential. Kindness without strength is not kindness. It is anxiety wearing a generous face. But here is what most people never realize. The reason most of us confuse kindness with weakness is not because we are naive. It is because we were trained from an early age to associate our own peace with other people's approval. Think about how early it starts. As children, we learn very quickly that certain behaviors bring warmth and certain behaviors bring withdrawal. Agree and you are loved. Disagree and the temperature drops. Show your anger and the room becomes uncomfortable. cry at the wrong moment and you are told to calm down, told you are too much, told that your feelings are inconvenient. And so we adapt. We become excellent editors of ourselves. We learn to show the version of us that keeps things smooth. And we get very, very good at it. So good that eventually we cannot always tell the difference between what we actually want and what we have learned to perform. Psychologists have a name for the extreme version of this: people-pleasing. But that name makes it sound almost harmless, like a minor personality quirk, like preferring tea over coffee. What it actually is a deeply ingrained survival strategy that slowly eats through your identity from the inside. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach yourself something. You teach yourself that your real feelings are a problem, that your needs are negotiable, that who you actually are is less acceptable than the version of you that everyone approves of. And over time, you stop being able to find yourself underneath all those performances. You look in the mirror and you see a person who everyone likes and who somehow feels completely unknown. The Stoics had a word for what gets lost in that process: hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the command center of the self, the part of you that decides, that chooses, that acts from principle rather than from fear. Epictetus, who had been an actual slave before becoming one of the most respected philosophers of his era, understood this better than almost anyone. He had experienced, in the most literal possible sense, what it meant to have no control over your external circumstances. And what he discovered in that experience was something that changed the entire direction of his philosophy. He discovered that no one, not an owner, not an emperor, not a crowd, not a circumstance, could reach the place inside him where his choices lived. That place was always his, and it is always yours. Epictetus taught what became one of the central pillars of Stoic thought: the dichotomy of control, the recognition that some things are within your power and some things are not. Your body, your reputation, what other people think of you, what they say about you, whether they approve of you, none of that is within your control. What is within your control is your judgment, your intention, your response, your character. That is it. That is the whole list. And the Stoics believed that the moment you genuinely understand that distinction, not intellectually but in your bones, something shifts in you that cannot be undone. Because you stop spending your energy trying to manage what other people think, and you start spending it on the only thing that was ever actually yours. But this is where it gets complicated, and this is exactly where most people fail. Understanding the dichotomy of control is easy. Living it is something else, because the approval of other people does not feel abstract. It feels urgent. It feels like oxygen. There is a reason for that. Human beings evolved in small social groups, where being rejected by the tribe was not just emotionally painful, it was genuinely dangerous. Exclusion meant exposure. It meant no protection, no resources, no survival. Your nervous system does not know that it is the 21st century. It does not know that the person whose opinion you are afraid of is not actually a threat to your physical survival. It just knows that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Literally the same pathways. Which means that when you are afraid of someone's disapproval, your body is responding as if your life is in danger. And from inside that state, choosing your values over their comfort feels almost physically impossible. This is not weakness, this is biology. But here is the Stoic response to biology. You are not your instincts. You are the thing that observes your instincts. You are the faculty that can look at a fear response and say, I see you, I understand why you exist, and I am choosing differently anyway. That is not suppression. That is not coldness. That is the highest form of self-mastery that human beings are capable of. And the Stoics did not think it came naturally to anyone. They thought it was a practice, something you built, something you returned to every single day, the way Marcus Aurelius returned to that journal every night, not because he had mastered it, but because mastery was the direction, not the destination. Now I want to tell you about a different kind of person, not a philosopher, not an emperor, just someone ordinary, someone you might know. Imagine a man in his mid-30s, thoughtful, intelligent, generous almost to a fault. Everyone in his life would describe him as the most considerate person they know. He never cancels plans. He always shows up when people need him. He never says anything that could cause offense. He adjusts his opinions in real time, depending on who he is talking to. He is beloved. He is appreciated. He is also, underneath all of that, one of the loneliest people you have ever met. Not because no one loves him, but because no one actually knows him. Because the version of himself that he presents to the world is so carefully edited, so continuously adjusted for audience approval, that the actual man, the one with real opinions and real frustrations and real desires, has almost disappeared. He wakes up some mornings and feels a grief he cannot name, a sense of having lost something he cannot quite remember having. And the terrifying part is that everyone around him would be shocked to hear it. Because from the outside, he seems fine. From the outside, he seems more than fine. That man is not rare. That man is everywhere. And the Stoics would look at that man with something between compassion and urgency, because they understood that the slow erosion of self is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It happens one small compromise at a time, one swallowed truth at a time, one surrendered boundary at a time, until one day you look up and realize you have been living someone else's idea of who you should be for so long that you have forgotten what your own idea ever was. Yet this is where everything changes, because the Stoics did not see this as a permanent condition. They saw it as a philosophical emergency that had a philosophical answer. The answer begins with the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These were not decorative concepts to the Stoics. They were the operational blueprint of a well-lived life. And what strikes me about them is how deliberately they work against the kind of slow self-erasure I just described. Wisdom is not intelligence. Intelligence is raw processing power. Wisdom is the ability to see clearly, to understand a situation not just as it appears, but as it actually is. To see that the person who agrees with everything is not being kind, they are being afraid. To see that the relationship you are maintaining at enormous personal cost is not love, it is dependency. Wisdom cuts through the comfortable stories we tell ourselves and shows us the reality underneath, and that is uncomfortable, which is exactly why most people avoid it. Justice, in the Stoic sense, is not about courts and punishment. It is about right relationship, with yourself, with others, with the world. The just person does not simply give others what they want. They give others and themselves what is actually right. And sometimes what is actually right is a firm no. Sometimes it is a difficult conversation. Sometimes it is the removal of yourself from a situation that was never serving either party honestly. Courage is the one people talk about most and practice least. Because real courage in daily life is not dramatic. It does not look like charging into battle. It looks like saying the thing you have been afraid to say for 3 years. It looks like maintaining a position when everyone in the room disagrees with you and you know you are right. It looks like choosing your own integrity over someone else's comfort, even when that choice costs you something real. And temperance. The virtue that is perhaps most misunderstood. Temperance is not abstinence. It is not restriction for its own sake. It is proportion. It is the discipline to ensure that nothing owns you, not anger, not pleasure, not the need for approval, not the fear of rejection. The temperate person can feel all of those things without being driven by any of them, and that freedom, that genuine freedom from being controlled by your own reactions, is what the Stoics considered the highest form of wealth a person could possess. But there is another layer to this, and it is the layer that most philosophy videos never reach. Because the danger of talking about strength and self-mastery and becoming dangerous is that people hear it and they think, finally, permission to stop being soft, permission to care less, permission to build walls and call them wisdom. And that is the exact opposite of what Stoicism teaches. The Stoics were not interested in creating people who were difficult. They were interested in creating people who were real. And real people, people who are genuinely grounded in their own character, are not cold. They are not indifferent. They are not armored against human connection. They are, in the deepest sense, more available for it. Because they are not performing, they are not managing impressions. They are not carrying the exhausting weight of a false self into every room they enter. There is a quality that genuine strength produces in a person that no amount of performed toughness ever can. And that quality is presence, real presence, the kind that other people feel before you say a word. Think about the lion again, not a roaring lion, not a lion asserting dominance or making itself known. A lion simply resting in the shade of an acacia tree in the late afternoon. The grass is still, the light is golden and low, and every creature within a certain radius has instinctively adjusted its path. Not because the lion did anything, but because the lion is what it is, completely and without apology, and the world around it responds to that reality without being asked. There is no performance. There is no announcement. There is just the undeniable fact of what it is. That is what Stoic strength looks like in a person. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not even particularly visible until someone tries to move it. And then it becomes very clear, very quickly, that this person has a center, that they know who they are, that there is something in them that cannot be flattered away or criticized into retreat or emotionally manipulated into doing what they were not going to do. Seneca wrote about this with a clarity that still astonishes me. He understood that the person who chases approval has made themselves a hostage. Every opinion becomes a cage. Every criticism becomes a wound. Every silence from someone whose admiration you need becomes a source of private anguish. And he saw this not as a character flaw, but as a philosophical error, a misunderstanding of what is actually yours and what was never yours to begin with. Your reputation is not yours. It lives in other people's minds. You cannot control it. What is yours is your character. And the Stoic insight is that when you pour your energy into your character instead of your reputation, something strange and wonderful begins to happen. Your reputation often improves anyway, not because you managed it, but because character, genuine character, is something people can feel. It radiates. It does not need to advertise itself. Now here is the question that matters, the one underneath all of this, the one I think you came here for, even if you did not know how to say it. How do you become this? Not in theory, not in philosophy class, but in the actual texture of your actual life, with your actual relationships and your actual history and the actual patterns that have been running in you for years or decades. How do you build something inside yourself that is solid enough to hold? The Stoics did not offer a shortcut. They never pretended there was one. What they offered was a practice, daily, unglamorous, honest practice. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up as the man his journal describes. He wrote that journal because becoming that man required constant, deliberate effort. He was working against his own impulses every single day, against impatience, against the seduction of anger, against the very human desire to let power corrupt the quality of his thinking. The practice begins with a single, non-negotiable commitment, the commitment to notice, to stop running on automatic and begin actually watching yourself, watching when you say yes and mean no, watching when you adjust your opinion to match the room, watching when you feel that familiar contraction of self that happens right before you choose someone else's comfort over your own truth. Just notice, without judgment at first, just see it clearly, because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. From noticing comes choosing, and this is where it gets genuinely difficult, because choosing differently, acting from your actual values instead of your fear, often feels worse before it feels better. The first time you hold a boundary that you previously would have collapsed, it will feel wrong. It will feel rude. It will feel like you are being the problem. Your nervous system will sound every alarm it has, and you have to do it anyway. Not aggressively, not dramatically, quietly, clearly, with the calm of someone who knows exactly where they stand. And gradually, through that repetition, through that daily return to your own values, something builds, something that did not exist before, a kind of inner architecture that holds. A confidence that is not based on other people's responses because it was never asking for them. A kindness that has weight to it because it is offered freely, not fearfully. A presence that other people feel as something steady in a world that constantly shifts. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature, not nature as in the outdoors, nature as in your highest nature. Your nature as a rational, social, moral creature, capable of choosing what is right over what is easy, capable of being genuinely good, not because circumstances forced you to be, but because you decided to be, every day, in the small choices, in the moments no one sees, in the journal you write to yourself at night when the performance is over and it is just you. There is a question I want to leave you with, not a comfortable one, not one that has a neat answer. If you removed, just for a moment, every behavior you do to earn approval, every opinion you have softened to avoid conflict, every yes you have given when you meant no, every version of yourself you have performed for an audience, if you stripped all of that away entirely, what would be left? Who would be standing there? Because that person, that real person underneath all the accommodation and the fear and the careful management of impressions, that person deserves to exist. Not just in private, not just when it is safe, but fully, honestly, in the actual rooms of your actual life. The Stoics did not promise that would be easy. They promised it would be worth it. And more than that, they promised it was the only life that was genuinely yours. Everything else is just a very convincing performance of someone else's idea of who you should be. And you have been performing long enough.